Welcome to the O Show, your number one podcast for everything training, mindset, and nutrition. I am your host, Oren McCarry, and it is my goal to help you access the best information around to allow you to kick ass in the gym, in the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. Between my own experiences and those of my amazing guests, I'm confident we will do that. So let's strap in and level up your life starting right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys. Welcome to today's episode of the O Show. I am your host, Oren McCarry, and today I am joined by a fellow Aussie native. Obviously, I'm not Australian, but she is on the East Coast and she is kicking some ass on Instagram lately. A lot of you guys who have been speaking to in my DMs are coming in and have said, yeah, I seen you post on Sharelle's story, and it's awesome to know that her post on that is bringing people to this podcast, and I just can't wait to dive in. So welcome, please, Sharelle Grant, to the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. Our accents are going to be completely polarized in this episode, I'm realizing.
Yeah, 100%. But hopefully a lot of our viewpoints will be the same, and hopefully the value that we bring will be exactly the same and very aligned. And I think it will be. I'm very excited for this one. So, mate, if people don't know who you are, like I said, a lot of people have followed me as a result of you posting over the past couple of weeks saying we're going to do this. But if people don't know who Sharelle is, give us a little bit of a background into you, your competitive history, and sort of how you get into the fitness industry and coaching there.
Yeah. So obviously, hi, I'm Sharelle, for anyone who doesn't know me. I currently work as a women's health and fitness coach, and I've been doing that for the past 12 months now. But for the last, 7 or 8 years, I worked as a registered nurse and then became a midwife. So I worked heavily in healthcare and in different areas of women's health. And that's really what got me interested in health to begin with. And then on the side, I also was getting into fitness. So I started out like most women, in the cardio room, sort of cardio bunny background, running mostly. And then I started lifting weights and sort of developing a real love for strength training. And that's what got me into bodybuilding as such. So I felt like I had two identities for such a long period of time, where I was like this healthcare professional and then also this bikini competitor who loved fitness and, getting on bodybuilding.com and T Nation and reading up on all the articles. And I just noticed such a gap between the two. So health and fitness, they're used together and they're just so different. So I've come into the coaching space now, like just with, a solid background in healthcare, and really transitioned into the coaching space. And I love integrating women's health into fitness because I can just see such a big gap between the two. And that's what I love using my social media platforms for, as well as my own podcast, to be able to share some of the messages and give women's health like the airtime in the fitness industry that it deserves.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that's massive. People come because they maybe admire your physique or they see you competing in that, and then they end up getting the message about, how to do things healthily and everything along the way. And that's huge, because that means these people come in aren't being sucked into, the negatives about body image and competing and all this, and they're being guided with some proper instruction on, how to tackle the right mindset, the right approach to their calories, to their periods, to everything else that goes on hormonally in the body, which is a complex equation. And if you don't treat your body with that amount of respect as a female, it can go wrong, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I first started competing specifically, a lot of the information that was put out there on the internet and social media was for men as well. And that's what made me really curious. Like, I was on contraception and there was just things that weren't lining up for me that, when the information I was consuming, and when I tried to find a lot of, factual information or resources that I could implement into my own training, rather than just sort of like training like a male bodybuilder, there was just no information. So we're really fortunate with a lot of the platforms that we have now to have access to some incredible women who are researching in women's health and fitness and putting that information out there as well. So it's such a great time to be in the gym as a female now.
Yeah, 100%. And something you said earlier was about the transition from the cardio bunny to the weights room, and a lot of women will probably be in the same position. So have you got any advice from people who are maybe a little bit intimidated to see that as the guys area, or they might see the odd girl roaming in there and be like, oh, I wish I could be like that girl, you know, and have the confidence to do that? Have you got any sort of tips for people who want to transition to weights?
Yeah, I mean, it has a lot to do with, I guess, confidence. Like when I used to, before I'd go to the gym, like I would write down my workout pen and paper and research on YouTube, all the exercises I was going to do before I'd even go to the gym, just so I had some understanding. And I think today we're really fortunate because we've got access to a lot of like online coaching and apps and different sorts of resources that take that sort of problem away, where you can literally just go into the gym and know what you're doing. So I think having a plan is always the first, I guess, important factor when you are transitioning, because it's so easy just to go into the gym and jump on the cross trainer for 20 minutes. It's so low friction. And that's why I think a lot of women feel comfortable doing that. But I always say to women, like, the goal isn't to lose weight. The goal is to lose body fat or transform your body or get stronger. So when you're just using calories and burning and going down that pathway, it's not going to lead you to the result that you actually want. Like if you want to build a physique or build a body or confidence, it comes from doing hard things and actually creating muscle mass. And the only way to actually do that is with, you know, strength training or resistance training, I should say. Working with someone in person is always incredibly valuable as well. Like I tell a lot of beginners that, you know, if you're just stepping foot into the gym for the first time, you can make such a huge amount of progress with, you know, a couple of months or 6 months working with someone in person than sort of just guessing and winging it for a couple of years. That's something I wish I did right at the start, most definitely.
Yeah, cool. And to share your own experience, like how long do you reckon it took you to start to see considerable change? Like you said, you wish you had invested in a PT earlier. So how long do you think you were probably winging it and just like trying these things out before you actually started to see some killer progress?
That's a good question. I mean, way back when I first started sort of lifting or training, I did, as everyone does, like a generic 12-week challenge. And that was the first time that I'd consistently followed a structured program. And even though I'm not like a massive fan of just challenges because of the way they're sort of marketed and sold and I guess the results that are promised with them, it is a good opportunity for people to actually follow a process and to have like an outline or a blueprint of what your gym training should look like. So for me, like, you know, maybe 4 years ago now, 5 years ago now, when I did transition into resistance training and I followed a program, it was like at the end of the 12 weeks and I was like, wow, like I have made a huge amount of progress just by actually progressively overloading and following structure rather than just going into the gym and doing what I feel like. So I'm not saying you can make those results in 12 weeks, but I think that was a really good indicator for me of how important progressive overload and structure actually is in your gym programming. And to be completely honest, I feel like the last maybe 2 to 3 years, I've really advanced my physique just from increasing training IQ and learning more about actual, you know, bodybuilding and resistance training and cleaning up techniques. So I think it's a compounding effect. And I don't think, you know, that's the great thing about fitness. You're never sort of fully 100% satisfied with what you're doing. You always got room for progression. So, you know, a few years of consistent training can make the world of a difference.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And then how long was it before from you started in the weights room, maybe doing that 12-week challenge and seeing things, to then deciding, I want to take this up a notch. Let's go and compete in a bikini show.
I'm probably not the best example, but I waited like, I did this 12-week challenge and I was like, I loved this result that I'd gotten. And I was training out of like just a local country gym, sort of where I studied. And there was this like guy that I used to call Gym Dad there. He was like my gym mentor, like in the gym. He used to help me out, and like old school bro bodybuilder. He was the best. He would always say to me, he's like, have you thought about competing? You should compete. And I was like, I could never do that. I could never do that. I could never get up on a bikini. Oh my God, what are you talking about? And then he just kept saying it, just like planted that seed. And so I just started doing some research and like looking up online. And it was probably like 6 months after I sort of finished that challenge that I was like, I'm going to go on and actually just do this. So I started my own comp prep. And again, not the best example. I prepped myself for my first sort of maybe 2 years of competing. Very naive, bodybuilding.com, like I said, but I learned so much. Like I learned so much by going through comp preps and making mistakes and like, you know, doing my own peak weeks and reverse dieting and gaining weight and going through all those, I guess, hardships that you do as a competitor. And then, I guess then I just progressed and learned along the way and stepped up to the WBFF, which is the federation I compete with now. And I eventually became a pro with that federation. And it's just been like such an incredible journey to look back at where I did start and I guess some of the errors and the mistakes that I've made along the way. And that's a big part of like what I love putting out there on social media and in my own coaching, just being like, don't make the same mistakes that I did.
Okay, awesome. And obviously people listening to this, you know, maybe doing things by themselves or they're just starting to think about maybe competing. They're going to hear this and think, but Sharelle, what are those mistakes? Like, can you let me know? Like, what would you say would be the biggest one or two things that if you were going back now, you wish you could go back and change and be like, listen, Sharelle, no, do it this way and you'll get there faster or you'll do better?
Probably nutrition. Like at the start, you know, I definitely, again, with the challenges, that this is the part about them I don't usually like, is the nutritional component. Rigidity and just super structured meal plans, probably 1,200 calories now when I look back at, on it. It's no surprise. Like, of course, you're going to lose a lot of body fat when you do that. But something that I think is incredibly valuable for any beginner is just capitalizing on those first 12 plus months of training and how much muscle mass you can put on in that amount of time if you do have a good structure and you're actually fueling your body. So when I say that I made a lot of progress over the last few years, I believe that's because I've learned the importance of sitting at maintenance calories, pushing into small surpluses and structuring my nutrition in the same way that you would your training. You know, we can't just consistently eat low calories. We need to fuel our body properly so that we can actually grow the muscle mass that we want to and actually create the changes that we want to. So nutrition's a big one, as well as learning about flexible dieting and tracking your macros. I think that is just so invaluable for anyone and everyone to learn about. Meal plans are obviously easy, but when you actually learn how to track your own macros, that means that you can make your own meal plans and you can make your own structure, and you have the awareness to be able to take these skills when you go out for lunch or dinner and not develop, I guess, disordered eating behaviors, which is very, very common amongst not only bikini competitors, but even just general women that are interested in health and fitness. It's also what develops, I guess, bad relationships with like carbohydrates, for example, like thinking that carbs are the devil, when you actually look at, okay, well, carbs are carbs, it's just all glycogen in the muscles. So when you learn more, like education is very empowering, and that was just a big step for me in terms of nutrition.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people will initially think they need that meal plan or fight the whole learning about flexible diet, and like new people come in, hey, can you just give me a meal plan for the first 4 weeks, which I'm happy to do if people need meal plans. But like, for example, if I put salmon and sweet potatoes on their meal plan and it's down for their evening meal, I know within a week or 10 days they're going to message me saying, oh, I can't do salmon anymore, like what I need to eat instead. And that's the drawback of having a set meal plan, is then you've got to message your coach rather than just change it yourself. You've got to message your coach being like, hey, can you change this for me? And it just becomes, not that the coach minds, they'll happily do the work and help you along the way, but it just means then you've got to wait for the coach to message you back, give you an alternative, and then maybe 2 days later you get sick of something else, and then you're not really taking the result into your own hands. You're not learning anything, and you're relying on somebody else to tell you what to eat rather than just learning what's in the food yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say to like a lot of my own clients, like the goal isn't to track forever. Like tracking your macros is like tracing paper at school. You know, it's going to teach you how to be able to like do it on your own. So eventually, you know, you don't never lose that skill. You're always able to look down at your plate and dissect it and break it apart and be like, okay, cool, about 30 grams of protein. And to me, people think, a lot of people tend to think that it's like obsessive, like, oh, you're tracking, like just we're just out for lunch. But it's actually liberating for a lot of people to be able to have those skills now, because it's very freeing. You now don't have restrictions on what food sources you can eat. So yeah, I always say to people when they're first starting tracking, it's like anything. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, but if you're comfortable, you're not learning. So this is a part of that process. Like you're not going to hit your macros for the first couple of weeks, probably month. That's not the goal either. Like, just focus on protein. And I think that's just like a message I really like to put out there, is just about like sustainable long-term results take work and effort and change. And if you always do what you've always done, like followed a meal plan or only done your challenges on repeat, you're going to get the same result time and time again, and that's going to wear out.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. And I think that covers a lot of, the nutrition mistakes that people might make at the start. But one thing we're talking about was your transition to the WBFF, obviously, where a lot of people will know you from. But if they don't, let's do a quick recap of sort of when you started to compete there and sort of how you've done since then, and when was like your last show, and are you maybe planning to compete again? Let's give people a little bit of an insight with that.
Yeah, so I finished up competing with some of the smaller federations in 2018. I think I did my last show. And once I finished that last show for some of the other federations, I generally thought that I wouldn't compete again. I was like, okay, that's it. I've finished that chapter, closed that book, just because I didn't get anything out of, I guess, the shows or the process for those federations. But then when I started looking at the WBFF in this more, I guess, feminine, fuller, healthier looking physique rewarded on stage, and the charisma and the personality that sort of comes with competing with the brand, I started to become curious. And then looking at, I guess, some of the pros, and that fire just started burning again. And I was like, okay, one more. I'm going to do one more. So I said to my partner, I was like, I'll do one more. And he's like, okay, one more. So I hired a coach for the first time, and I was like, yep, I'm going to go out with a bang. I'll do one more show. And that was, I think, the back end of 2018. I did like a 4 or 6 month prep. And I actually placed second in my first ever bikini show, which, is pretty good for WFF, because you are on stage with like 70 other girls. So, and I was like, I would be so happy with top 10. So when I got second place, I was so genuinely happy with the physique and the prep and the process. And I loved the show day and everyone that I connected with as well. Like, that's a huge part of the brand, is just the networking that comes out of it and the friends that you make in the federation too. And I just have not looked back since then. So I went on and competed. After that, I actually got offered to go overseas and compete in Dallas with one of my sponsors, who sort of sponsored me to do that. And I won my pro card over in the States, in Texas. So after I did that, I was like on a big high, and I just went straight on and did Worlds again. I was just all in. And I think I got 8th in Worlds for my first year in 2019, I want to say. And then I had a bit of a break, and then I went back and competed in the last show in 2019 before COVID sort of hit the world. So that was my second pro show after Worlds, and I got, I want to say, 5th place in that show in 2019.
Nice. So there's been like a nice steady progression there, right? Like, in the federation, went from second to winning the pro card, then 8th, and then 5th, and you sort of climbing the ranks, which is probably a reason why people will like you, right? Because they're seeing you go through your own journey, but they're also seeing you do better as a result of the hard work you're putting in as well.
Yeah, I feel like with competing as well, when you start out as an amateur, you can make so much progress in those years, because you can. And then once you get to the pro level as well, like I was like, it's like going from year 6 to year 7. In primary school, you're at the top dog. And then once you get your pro card, you're like bottom of the ranks again. And I feel like then you've just got to hustle and do the work again. But I'm at this interesting place now with my own competing that I'm going to be changing categories, because I feel like I've outgrown the bikini category in just terms of the muscle mass that I've put on over the last sort of couple of years. So I'll be stepping up to the wellness division, which is a new division that's starting this year. And for those who don't know, wellness is sort of a look in between bikini and fitness. So not as lean as fitness, but more muscle mass than bikini. So this will be an interesting prep that's coming up for me.
Nice. And let's talk about that. Like obviously outgrowing a division, because there's be a lot of competitors listening to this, either coming from your channel or who follow me already. So how does your training look to allow you to add such muscle mass to outgrow the category you compete in? Like how would a traditional sort of week look? Like calories, potentially the high of calories during like a building phase. Let's go into a bit more personal detail about how that looks for you.
Yeah, so once I did my last show in 2019, I sort of already knew that I was sort of tipping on the point of having too much muscle mass for bikini. It was sort of some of my feedback. And the thing is, I love training. Like, I love to push hard. So for me, like, I train first and I compete second. So I didn't want to change my training to suit a division, to be honest, or a category. That wasn't something I was willing to do, was like detrain myself or not be able to work as hard. That would be miserable for me in the gym. So I decided to push harder in my training and just continue training as I wanted to and just accept what it was. And then they bring out this wellness division, and it just sort of all married in nicely. So over the last 12 months, I mean, we've all been through so much with COVID. There has been periods where, you know, training's obviously not happened and been second. But I actually sustained hamstring tendonitis probably at the start, like last January, and that has made me, that injury has been a blessing. It's made me completely rechange the way that I train now. So I really looked at my volume that I was doing, because obviously any sort of like tendonitis issues is like overuse. And I really assessed my volume, and I was just doing so much volume. I was training like 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and like a lot of, I want to say, unproductive exercises for my goals. So I've really stripped back a lot of my volume, and I've only been training 4 days a week for the last 12 to 18 months now. Nice. And I've made a huge amount of progress in that time, just because I've actually been able to push my intensity a lot higher in some of my sessions, and train more like a traditional bodybuilder, so to speak.
Yeah, nice. And I think you were working with Eugene. I'm not sure if you still are. That's ongoing, right?
Yeah, he's been a really integral part into, I guess, the way that I do train now. Like, it's been a blessing in disguise, meeting him, running into him and sort of connecting with him. And I was having like niggles and little injuries, and then I got this tendonitis, and, you know, he's my training partner and I train with him 4 days a week. So I've just learned so much from him. He's not coaching me, but I definitely just pick his brain every training session. And yeah, like just training with someone and having different perspectives, because I feel like on Instagram as well, you see the high reels of a lot of like heavy squats and heavy deadlifts and a lot of barbell work, specifically like bikini competitors doing these sorts of things. And that's just what I always thought was an optimal way to train as well, sort of that powerlifting style bled in bodybuilding style approach. Whereas now I'm a lot more strategic and selective with exercise selection, volume, intensity, what I'm pushing on, what I'm pulling back on, as well as making sure I'm choosing exercises that are appropriate for the muscles that I want to bring up.
Yeah, awesome. And did you actually enjoy when you trained like that, you know, with squats, heavy squats, deadlifts, rather than the more focused, like muscle focused work in terms of growth rather than strength? Were you enjoying that sort of powerlifting style training at the time, or was it just, did you not like it and it was just something you thought you had to do? What was your mindset around that?
I mean, there was definitely a good period of time where I got right into strength training and I was doing a lot of barbell work. And I think that's incredible for a lot of women to get into, to start doing, to build up strength. And I think everyone should be able to do a barbell squat if they had to. But training it, for me, just sort of wasn't as productive as what it is, say, on a leg press, so to speak. So I think it's just challenged my way of thinking about programming, in that it's so individualized, and just because everyone's doing something doesn't mean you should or have to. And just because you can doesn't mean you should either. So for me, I like training. I love progressing and I love building my physique, and strength training doesn't just have to be with a barbell back squat. It can be with a Bulgarian split squat. It can be on a hack squat. It can be in multiple different ways. So I think for a lot of people, it's about identifying what you love about training and what's actually important to you. So for me, I'm a bodybuilder, not a powerlifter. I'm a bodybuilder, not a powerlifter. But yeah, I think it works for some people. Absolutely. It's just we're also different in how we're built.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, like, they come with the goal of, I want to get stronger, I want to feel strong, and think they've got to do powerlifting to get there. But without realizing that if you're loading a leg press and you're overloading it with more reps or more weight over time, you're getting stronger. Same with a bicep curl or a T-bar row or whatever it is that you implement, you're still getting stronger. It's just in a completely different rep scheme. It's a completely different movement, and it's still with the same goal, but it's obviously more tailored towards targeting specific muscles, like you said, and bringing up the areas that you want to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, a lot of people do some things because they feel like they have to, and they feel like it's the only way. And they feel like, oh, well, back squats are the best exercise for glutes. And there's just a lot of these things that are bled on social media for that reason. And I like coming in and being like, I train 4 days a week. I don't do barbell back squats. Like, I'm recovering great. Like, there's multiple ways to do something and to achieve a result. And like, whilst I do absolutely program a lot of those movements for my own clientele, it's not for everyone. And, as coaches, we have to remove that bias in ourselves so that we can actually help people.
Yeah, 100%. Now let's switch gears a little bit away from training and that stuff. Like, one thing that I noticed since we really started to connect is your reels started to pop up on my story more and more. So I've been seeing them a lot more in the past month, and they're fantastic. I think it's the right message. It's all about, the right mindset around diet and, fads to let go of, all these different things. So I encourage guys to go obviously check you out if they don't follow you now. But what made you go down that route of, not necessarily just about training and maybe about you as the brand, because you are the brand, but rather than just about you and your physique and your journey, you're trying to help people with this sort of stuff. And obviously using reels is a great way to do that, because at the minute it's throwing it out to the heaps of people for you as well. But why go down that route rather than just, training, diet, and maybe just talking about you and your journey?
Really good question. I feel like that's what a lot of people in the fitness space do, is they get so fixated on just the fitness. And what they don't realize is, like one of the famous quotes, like, people don't buy what they do, they buy who you are. So a lot of people want to be coached by you as the person. They want to sit down and have a conversation with you. They want to learn from you. So I think like Instagram, podcasting, YouTubing, social media platforms are just different ways to be able to communicate. And in 2021, you need to be using multiple different forms of platforms and different ways to communicate to all audiences. And something that used to frustrate me when I started to, I guess, get more into fitness and look at the evidence-based community, for example, was just sometimes the level of communication wasn't there. And if I couldn't grasp it, I knew that a lot of my audience couldn't either. So something I really like is just taking a message and trying to simplify it. Even if I could use the bigger words, I don't. I like to make it really easily digestible so that everyone can watch that reel and take the message away from it. So I think that's just why I go down that pathway, because one, I am my brand, and I don't want people just to come to me for a body. I don't want people to come to me for a result. I want people to come because they want to learn from me, because they want to be a part of my community, because they like me as a person as well. And I think that's just such an important part, because at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing. We're all giving out training advice and nutrition advice. So you have to look at your point of difference. And for me, women's health and health as a whole, like, I'm right into sleep and nutrition and mindset and self-care and all those sorts of components, because I see them as equal to your training and nutrition.
Yeah, 100%. And what do you feel is the maybe the biggest rock that people can move apart from training and nutrition that often gets neglected? Is it sleep? Is it stress? Is it time management? Is it, hobbies outside of the gym? What do you think is the biggest thing that can provide the biggest benefit if people were to get on board with it?
Probably sleep, to be honest. I am right into sleep. I'm a sleep guru. I coming from a nursing midwifery background, I worked a lot of night duty and I developed insomnia going through postgrad studies. And that was like, again, we learned so much from adversity. That was such a horrible experience to go through. And that's when I got right interested into like tracking my sleep. I was one of the first ones to get an Oura ring to start tracking that data a couple of years ago. I came off contraception in that time. I started meditating and I was medicated for it. And I just went through all this stuff and I was like, what's the problem? Is it is it my sleep? Is it just my sleep? How can I fix that? Surely it's not diazepam that's going to do it. So going through all those sort of situations, and then as well as navigating, competing with night duty, like I used to work night duty every 3 or 4 weeks. And like, I've done peak weeks in night duty and just trying to biohack anything I could to get into shape and to preserve recovery around training. I learned so much. I got into a lot of books and a lot of like Matthew Walker's work and a lot of sleep research. And I know how much poor sleep and insomnia impacts you, not just physically, but also mentally. And that's just something I'm so big on with my own coaching, and something I do in myself is just really prioritizing like sleep quality and sleep hygiene.
Yeah, 100%. So how do you find the Oura ring for tracking those? I wear one of them as well. So how do you find the actual tracking, and has that changed since you started to wear it and you're getting better with your sleep hygiene and different habits?
Yeah, so when I first got it, my deep sleep was probably only about an hour and a half, and REM was about an hour. And it's really cool because I can look back on this data now and see how the trends have changed. This is when I was working full-time shift work, but I honestly take my hat off to myself because I killed shift work as a shift worker. I really learned how to biohack myself around night duty and different sort of interventions and melatonin and things like that worked really well for me. But just, I think as well, like having something on your finger, people take accountability for granted. I think having something wearable that does track your sleep and shows you in the morning, like a performance review of your sleep hygiene the night before, is really integral for consistency when it comes to any sort of habit. So I've been able to like trial and error a lot of stuff, like my wind down routine, which is what I'm really big on, making sure that like clients, for example, like how are you winding down? We're not a switch. We need to be able to turn the dial down and actually soothe our body so it can get into a deeper stage of sleep. So for me, I'm really into like breath work and reading and meditation and no technology and screens and all the things that everyone does. And I just notice when I'm missing links, how much it actually does disturb my performance, my adherence, as well as my mindset and my productivity. So yeah, sleep's an incredibly undervalued, underused resource in the fitness space.
Yeah, 100%. And what sort of scores are you hitting now versus then? Like, has it improved a lot? Like, do you get the little crying that it gives you on Aura a lot, or
crying? I've never had a crying.
Yeah. So there's all sorts on there, I think. But like, because sleep is one of these things that, people don't even realize that they can make such a big impact. So like you say, I think tracking any sort of thing is going to be beneficial. But apart from sleep, then what would be the biggest potential mover in your opinion, that especially in the female space, that maybe they're not into? Would it be like potentially birth control? Is it tracking their cycle? Is it, managing stress? Because normally females hold a lot of stress for whatever reason, more so than males, from what I found working with both genders. What do you think would be the next sort of biggest lever to pull?
Yeah, look, I think like aside from sleep, which is something everyone can work on, including myself, for females in particular, it definitely is the like undertapped resource of learning how to train around your cycle. Like that is something that I think is just really undervalued again and underused. I guess the taboo thing is that, training around your cycle is only something that you can really do if you're not on hormonal contraception. So obviously I'm a midwife. I have no bias. Like, I think contraception is appropriate for some people. But then I think, like, when you're interested in optimizing performance and body composition and understanding about how to train around your cycle and improve that, what's measured is managed. And if you're having an augmented cycle, you don't know. So that was a big component for me. And the reason why I came off contraception was because I didn't have a cycle. I didn't know what was happening. And again, back to the Aura Ring, that was a really cool feature of that, was being able to see how my temperature, like my core body temperature, my HRV, my resting heart rate, all those sorts of things regulated again, coming off contraception. So learning how to work with your physiology rather than against it, learning that, you know, maybe you're not going to stick to your RPE scale. It's week 4, maybe you need to pull back, and just being more self-compassionate when it comes to, you know, we're not just figures. Like, we're wired very differently to men, and it's not always going to be optimal to hit your PRs in, you know, week 4 of your cycle. So it's heavy because it's a lot of education that comes with that, and it's not straightforward, and every female is very different. But I think the more conversations that I had about how women are different to men in their training, and how the cycle does impact those elements of your performance, the more curious that women can become, and the more comfortable that these conversations will be had.
Yep, perfect. Now let's switch gears again away from this, because obviously we've been talking about downtime and how important it is, like, to switch off at night. So what's Sharelle's favorite things to do to sort of wind down, or if you're not thinking about training and clients and everything else, what do you like to do? Are you into movies, books, music? Like, what gets you going, and what gets you to sort of chill out?
Yeah. It's something I'm working on, right? It's like taking more downtime, but I love nature. Like, I'm really big on just being able to get outdoors. You know, if I had my way, which I will one day, we'll be living on the beach. But I just love taking myself for walks and just being on my own and listening to music and just being outdoors. I think, you know, working in a hospital for so long in the past, like being indoors, I have such an appreciation for just being outdoors in the sun. So it's definitely getting outside and sort of being a bit, getting into nature, I guess. The other thing I do love doing is like reading as well. I love cooking. Something I did growing up is I have my ultralight pilot's license, and that's something I really want to get back into once all of this stuff sort of settles down and I have the time availability.
Yeah, nice. That's pretty cool as well, right? Something completely different I didn't expect you to say. That's awesome. So what about cooking? You mentioned cooking there. So if you're gonna go and make one big dish as either like your untracked meal or something that you really just enjoy cooking for whatever reason, what would you go and make right now if you had your way?
I'm so basic, but like just barramundi, like fish and chips is my absolute go-to. I eat that all the way through prep. I eat it all the time in my off season. Like, I live for barramundi. Have you seen Seaspiracy?
No, I'm kind of avoiding that.
I know, because I watched it and it's making me question my love for seafood, but I don't recommend watching it for anyone who does love seafood. But I'm just a fish and chip girl, very basic.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And would you always like go homemade if you're going to do that, or would you often frequent the chip shop and have a proper like dirty fish and chips as well?
Nah, I'm a home girl. I love cooking. I do love cooking. I love using like a lot of different herbs and spices, and I find it therapeutic, like chopping up vegetables. I don't know, I'm a bit weird like that. But I'm always like, if I can make it, I would. Like, I love eating out in the social side of like going out for breakfast and having coffee with friends. But if I can cook it, I definitely prefer that.
Yeah, awesome. And then if you were going out for like a meal with your partner or with the girls or whatever, and you get to choose a restaurant, what type of cuisine do you like? What's your favorite? Would you go like Chinese, Indian, Malaysian, like, you know, fresh fish, like, you know, like Australian cuisine? Like what would you sort of go for?
Probably Indian, to be honest. I love Indian. I cannot cook that well on my own, so that's probably why. Really love Indian as well as Vietnamese. So a big fan of pho. I'll go out for that usually, like, you know, at least once a fortnight.
Okay, nice. And then what's your coffee order? You said how you like going out for coffee. So what way do you drink your coffee?
Long black.
Just plain?
Plain long black. There's no other way to have coffee, in my opinion.
Yeah. And do you always go hot, or do you like alternate it with cold, like ice long blacks or whatever when it's hot?
No, just a hot coffee. See,
Yeah.
iced long blacks was actually very new to me. I only had my first one like when I moved to the city a couple of years ago. Definitely not something I was used to.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I find I'm kind of seasonal, where during the summer I'll either drink ice long blacks, and then like as soon as it gets cold, like it's kind of getting colder now here in Perth, and it's like, okay, I'll just move to something like a flat white or something rather than I don't know why. It's just when it's hot, I gravitate to the cold drinks, and when it's cold, I gravitate to the warm drinks.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but just it's always good. I think the first time I asked people about their coffee order was when Hattie was on, and I think that clip went down well. So that's why I dived in a lot into what you like is so.
I feel like you can tell a lot about people from their coffee order.
Yeah, 100%. You're probably judging me now. I'm a flat white. You're like, this guy.
I'm not black, so I don't know what you think about me. God.
Okay, mate. So final thing, like you've obviously got different platforms which you reach people on. So out of everything that you post stuff on or you put your energy into, what's your favorite way of connecting with people and sort of sharing your information or sharing your journey and getting the stuff out there?
Probably Zoom, to be honest. Like with my coaching, I do a lot of group coaching calls. And I just think like being able to sit down with someone like this and actually genuinely see them and have a real conversation with them and notice facial expressions and movements and body language, you can learn so much about people. And that's the way I love coaching, is via Zoom, just to be able to actually have that connection. But I guess in terms of social media, I love podcasting. Again, I just feel like I can take the things I want to say in a 15-second reel and give my real insight on them in a podcast. As well as stories. Like, I don't know about you, but when I first got on Instagram, I very much transitioned from Snapchat to using Instagram just like that. And no one was really, that I followed, was really using stories like that. And I just was like, I just Snapchat, right? Like I just share my day. And I think that is such a great way to show personality and to be able to connect with your followers as well, and to actually engage with them via DM. So definitely stories, Zoom, and podcasting.
Nice. I didn't expect Zoom to be thrown in there. So that's a nice little change of pace. I like that. And I love the fact that you enjoy the podcast inside as well. We spoke at the start about how you love just coming on different podcasts and sharing your story. So, mate, it's been great having you on today. But for the people who maybe don't follow the podcast or you on Instagram, how do they find you? How do they find out more about coaching, or how do they find the podcast if they're looking for it?
Yeah, so I guess my Instagram handle is just my name on Instagram, so just Sharelle Grant. And I also have a podcast with my co-host Danny, and that's called Level Up with Sharelle and Danny. And yeah, that's just where we talk about everything: health, fitness, who we are, competing. Aside from that, I do also do coaching, so you can find information there at just my website, SharelleGrant.com. And I've just released a Train with Sharelle program as well, which is pretty much my programming leading up to my comp prep show that I'm doing with a really good community of women as well.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. So lots of different avenues for people who are interested. So guys, I encourage you to go follow Sharelle if you don't already. If you have been enjoying this episode coming from Sharelle's side or coming from my side and listening to this, please screenshot it now, tag the both of us. It would be great to see the feedback and see if you guys enjoy this. And yeah, Sharelle, thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome and I really appreciate it today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of The O Show. If you know somebody who needs to hear this episode today, please share this with them via message or on social media. Don't forget to also take a screenshot and share it on your story and tag me at Oren McCarry so we can continue to grow the podcast and help more people change their lives with the advice given here. Also, keep the 5-star reviews coming over on iTunes, as that helps people who normally wouldn't listen to the show find it and get the O Show in their ears and drive the podcast forward to help more people around the world with the advice here. Have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.